North Korea test-fired multiple short-range ballistic missiles toward the East Sea this morning, which coincides with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's visit to South Korea for the Summit for Democracy. The third Summit for Democracy kicked off today in Seoul, bringing together leaders from around the world to address pressing concerns about democratic values. President Yoon called for cooperation so that AI and new digital tools can serve to defend democracy. Russian President Vladimir Putin clinched his fifth term as the country's leader, as widely predicted, with no actual contender. Having won with an overwhelming lead, he warned NATO of World War III if there's any direct conflict. It's March 18, 2024. This is Newscenter. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We start with news of a fresh display of defiance by Pyongyang, which comes days after a joint military drill by Seoul and Washington, and coincides with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's visit to South Korea for the Summit for Democracy. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung reports.
North Korea fired what is presumed to be multiple short-range ballistic missiles toward the East Sea Monday morning. Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff detected several SRBMs at 7:44 a.m. launched toward the East Sea from the Pyongyang area. It appears that at least 3 ballistic missiles flew approximately 300 kilometers northeast. The flight distance from Pyongyang to South Korea's Gaeryongdae military headquarters is also approximately 300 kilometers. Japanese authorities said the missiles reached a maximum altitude of about 50 kilometers. Given this data, experts believe it is likely that the SRBMs were KN-25s, which have allegedly been exported to Russia. South Korea's military strongly condemned North Korea's missile launch as a provocation that seriously threatens peace and stability on the Korean peninsula. The JCS added that it has strengthened surveillance and vigilance in preparation for additional launches and is maintaining a full readiness posture by closely cooperating with U.S. and Japanese authorities. According to Professor Yang Mu-jin at the University of North Korean Studies, the North's provocation has been timed to correspond with U.S. State Secretary Antony Blinken's arrival in Seoul to attend the Summit for Democracy.
Considering that the launch coincided with U.S. Secretary of State Blinken's visit to South Korea, I believe the North intended to display discomfort and put pressure on the U.S.
The launch comes over a month after North Korea fired multiple rounds of cruise missiles toward the East Sea. It's the second ballistic missile launch of the year, with the previous launch coming in January. Experts believe North Korea has remained rather low-key over the past few weeks in terms of threats and provocations, even during Seoul and Washington's Freedom Shield military exercise that wrapped up last week due to important political events in Russia and China. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The visiting U.S. State Secretary Antony Blinken was quick to condemn North Korea's latest round of missile launch and reaffirm America's commitment as he met South Korean President Yoon and Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yul today in Seoul. Our correspondent Kim Jong-sil has more.
A scheduled luncheon meeting between the top diplomats of Seoul and Washington came amid yet another provocative act by Pyongyang on Monday morning. Foreign Minister Cho and his U.S. counterpart, Secretary Blinken, condemned North Korea's launches of what appeared to be multiple short-range ballistic missiles ahead of the third Summit for Democracy taking place in Seoul. Seoul's foreign ministry released a statement saying that the top diplomats agreed that Pyongyang's continued threats would only enhance cooperation between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan, as well as the international community against the North. It added Secretary Blinken reaffirmed America's unwavering defense commitment to the security of South Korea. Minister Cho said even though the North has defined inter-Korean relations as those between hostile enemy states and announced that it will no longer seek reunification with the South, Seoul will continue to aim for reunification that extends freedom and basic human rights to all. This is the third time that the top diplomats of the allies have met in just a month. Before his talks with the foreign minister, the Secretary of State had a brief meeting with President Yoon. There, Mr. Blinken said the U.S. will always stand with South Korea for a firm response to North Korean provocations and for peace and stability on the Korean peninsula by continuing to strengthen extended deterrence through close cooperation. 김정실, Arirang News.
So as we heard, the third Democracy Summit kicked off in Seoul this morning to address threats to democratic principles. It's the first time that the U.S.-initiated conference is being hosted independently by another country. There, President Yoon called to safeguard democracy from the double-edged sword of digital technology. Our presidential office correspondent Oh Soo-young has details.
South Korea, the United States and the United Kingdom have called for solidarity in defending democracy for future generations amid fast-evolving digital changes that threaten freedom, human rights and prosperity. This came at the opening ceremony of the Third Summit for Democracy, which kicked off in Seoul on Monday, gathering world leaders, civil society and the private sector under the theme of democracy for the future generation. In his speech, President Yoon said artificial intelligence and new digital tools pose a double-edged sword to societies and individuals, citing fake news and disinformation as major threats. He also warned against a growing digital divide between nations that would widen economic gaps and, in turn, increase the democracy divide. He called for efforts to ensure digital progress goes hand-in-hand with democracy.
개인의 자유와 창의를 북돋우는 활기찬 민주주의는 청년들의 역량과 기회를 확장하는 촉진제가 될 것이며 이를 통해 우리의 미래 세대는 민주주의에 대해 더욱 확고한 믿음을 갖게 될 것입니다.
This year's summit begins with a ministerial-level meeting co-hosted by the UK and Ecuador, followed by an expert roundtable to address cyber threats while fostering digital innovation in a way that respects human rights and freedom in online spaces. Deeming South Korea a champion of democracy, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken remarked on the significance of the country hosting the summit independently for the first time outside the United States. The Summit for Democracy was first launched in 2021 under the leadership of US President Joe Biden amid the worrying rise of autocratic leaders and authoritarian governance around the world. Blinken called for collective efforts for democratic renewal to sustain faith in democracy.
In many places, basic freedoms have eroded. Electoral rights have come under assault. Corruption has eaten away at hope. As authoritarian and repressive regimes deploy technologies to undermine democracy and human rights, we need to ensure that technology sustains and supports democratic values and norms.
UK Deputy Prime Minister Oliver Dowden called for a full-spectrum response to a full spectrum of threats.
Increased cyber defences, tackling mis- and disinformation, protections for candidates at home, and global consensus abroad. We will not be afraid to call out this malign activity wherever we see it.
The plenary session of world leaders will be held virtually on Wednesday evening Seoul time, with President Yoon chairing the talk on technology, elections and fake news. Kenyan President William Ruto will lead a session on the Global South, and Danish leader Mette Frederiksen on inclusive society and youth empowerment. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Over in Russia, President Vladimir Putin won a landslide in the country's election with no actual contender, cementing his already tight grip on power. In his victory speech, Putin warned NATO of World War III if there's any direct conflict. Chung Eun-ju tells us more.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has won a fifth term as the country's leader, following an election that's been widely criticized as lacking democratic legitimacy. Russia's Central Election Commission on Monday revealed that with 60% of the votes counted, Putin had an overwhelming lead with over 87% voting for the incumbent leader. Putin visited his party headquarters in Moscow on Sunday and called on Russia to become stronger and more effective, thanking the Russian people for voting.
Initially, I would like to thank Russian citizens. We are all one team. All Russian citizens who came to polling stations and voted.
The outcome means Putin, age 71, will be in office until 2030. If Putin completes the full term, he will overtake Joseph Stalin and become Russia's longest-serving leader in more than 200 years. Putin has had little to no challenge during his rule, with most opposition candidates either dead, jailed, or barred from running for office. In the face of Putin's predictable victory, Russia's opposition sought to put together a show of strength. Yulia Navalnaya, the widow of Alexei Navalny, said Sunday that she wrote her late husband's name on the ballot. Navalny supporters also held demonstrations at polling stations throughout Russia while voting for other candidates or invalidating votes. In his election victory address to the press in Moscow on Monday morning, Putin said that Russia's armed forces were advancing in Ukraine every day and that Moscow's forces held the initiative on the battlefield. He also said the presence of Western troops in Ukraine could push the world to the brink of World War III. When asked about the potential for a direct conflict with NATO, he said he did not think that anyone was interested in such a scenario. Putin also said Russia was ready for talks on a French proposal for a ceasefire in Ukraine during the Olympic Games, but would need to take Russia's interests on the front line into account. 정은주, Arirang News.
Drastic measures is what President Yoon says will be taken to tackle South Korea's rising grocery prices, especially fruit, by injecting 150 trillion Korean won, or about $112 million or more if need be. This as he hosted a policy review meeting today at a supermarket in Seoul.
먼저 농산물 가격이 평년 수준으로 안정될 때까지 기간, 품목, 규모에 제한을 두지 않고 납품 단가와 할인 지원을 전폭적으로 시행하겠습니다. 냉해 등으로 상당한 기간 동안 높은 가격이 예상되는 사과와 배는 더 파격적으로 지원하겠습니다.
Fruit prices in February surged more than 40% on year, which drove the overall inflation rate to 3.1%. Among the measures also include lowering tariffs on imported fruits, with items such as kiwis and cherries newly added to the list of benefiting items. During the discussion, the Deputy Prime Minister for Finance, Choi Sang-mok, along with the Agricultural and Seafood Ministers, briefed the president, while civil organizations such as a consumer organization voiced their concerns to the president and his aides. The collective action by Korea's medical arena began with its junior doctors walking out of hospitals, followed by medical students taking leaves of absence. And come next Monday, their professors are poised to resign en masse should the government fail to back down from its plan to expand the medical school admissions quota. Our Kim Bo-kyung has the latest.
Junior doctors are not alone in deciding to walk away from their work sites. Professors at medical schools have also chosen to submit resignation letters starting next Monday, March 25th. Professors from 20 or half of South Korea's medical schools were present at a meeting late on Friday, with professors from 16 schools deciding overwhelmingly to resign. The 4 remaining schools are reportedly collecting opinions over whether and when to join in. Resignation submissions are set to start on the 25th, but dates could differ depending on each medical school's schedule. Professors from Seoul National University's medical school had previously decided to file resignations starting this Monday, but have decided to reschedule accordingly. The chief of the medical professors group strongly urged the government to back down from the plan to raise the enrollment quotas at med schools from 3,058 to 5,058 per year starting in 2025.
We desperately ask for a first step to be made to start discussions. We ask the government even more. Please let go of the figure of 2,000. Otherwise, we cannot start discussions at all.
To this, Health Minister Cho Tae-yul expressed serious concerns during a meeting at the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasure Headquarters held on Monday morning. While underlining that it is not acceptable to negotiate while holding people's lives hostage, the minister urged professors to work with the government so that trainee doctors could return to duties.
We should not negotiate over people's lives in any case. Please persuade trainee doctors and students who left hospitals and schools to return and participate in discussing reform tasks for the improvement of the healthcare system.
The minister said he would continue talks with directors not only from the 5 major hospitals, but also those at national hospitals. Those talks are slated for Monday and Tuesday. He also mentioned that intensive care units and emergency rooms would be closely monitored to prevent medical disruptions. As part of efforts to improve the healthcare system, the ministry announced additional reformative measures for the fee-for-service system. Also, regarding previous plans to inject some $7.5 billion for essential medical departments by 2028, it gave specific guidelines for compensation. $3.75 billion for surgical and internal medicine departments, and over $2 billion for pediatrics and childbirth. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
On the political front, Korea's 22nd general election is roughly 3 weeks away, and official registration is scheduled to start this Thursday. That being said, political parties are now finalizing their candidate rosters. Our correspondent Lee Si-hoo has this report.
The rival parties' candidate nomination procedures for April's general election are coming to a close. The ruling People Power Party nominated 3 more candidates on Sunday to wind up its official nominations. They have entered candidates in all of the 254 electoral districts in the country during a process that lasted more than a month. This is the first time in 16 years that the PPP has run in all districts. Of the 113 PPP members in the assembly as of February, 74 received official nominations. Their average age is around 58. The main opposition Democratic Party is also finishing up its nominations, finalizing candidates for 250 districts as of Monday. Of the 163 DP members of the assembly when the nomination process started, at least 64 members failed to receive official backing for a rerun. The average age of those nominated is around 57. On Sunday, the party held a special ceremony at the National Assembly, handing out certificates of nomination to its candidates. Meanwhile, proportional representation candidates who aren't elected to represent a certain district but are elected based on voter support for their party of representation are also being listed. The People Future Party, a satellite party created by the PPP, announced the final list of its 35 proportional representation nominees on Monday. The Democratic Alliance of Korea, a satellite party formed by the DP and other opposition parties, including the Progressive Party and the New Progressive Union, also has finalized a list of 30 nominees. The 2 main parties have not put forward any proportional representatives themselves, relying on their satellites to attract additional voters to earn more seats. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
Time now to take a look at what's been happening in the world of sports. Joining us in the studio is our sports editor, Paul Neat. Hello, Paul.
Hello there.
Let's first start with baseball. MLB is in town because of the historic season opener this Wednesday. I understand that a Korean baseball legend will throw a first pitch.
Yes, you're quite right. It's Park Chan-ho, who in 1994 became the first South Korean ever to play in MLB. But yes, he'll throw the ceremonial first pitch this Wednesday when his former team, the Los Angeles Dodgers, take on the San Diego Padres at the Gochok Skydome in Seoul. The match will be the first proper MLB game to be played in South Korea. Now, tickets, of course, sold out very quickly, but baseball fans in the country have been able to watch some pre-season friendlies instead. The Dodgers beat the Kiwoom Heroes 14-3 on Sunday, but none of those runs were scored by Japanese star Shohei Ohtani, who was struck out at both of his at-bats. Also on Sunday, the San Diego Padres beat South Korea's national baseball team 1-0. The one run came following a wild pitch, but it was a game that saw Padres star Kim Ha-sung return to his old stomping ground, the Gochok Skydome, as his former team, the Kiwoom Heroes, play their home games there.
And moving on to badminton, a Korean win at the All England Open.
Yes, Lee-so and Baek Hana, they won the women's doubles title. In Birmingham, England on Sunday, Lee and Baek beat Chiharu Shida and Nami Matsuyama of Japan 2-1. This was Korea's second win in as many years at the All England Open, which is regarded as the world's oldest and most prestigious badminton competition. Korea won the first set 21-19, but then lost the second 21-11. The win was sealed with a 21-17 win in the final set. The pair lost in the final last year to fellow Koreans Kim So-young and Kong Hee-young, and the win was also something of revenge as Lee and Baek lost to Shida and Matsuyama in the French Open quarter-finals just last week.
And moving on to football, South Korea's men's team resumes its World Cup qualification this week. It looks like a few of the players are in good form for their clubs.
Yes, that's right. Quite a few goals over the weekend as well, including Lee Gang-in, who scored a beautifully struck left-footed curler into the top corner during Paris Saint-Germain's 6-2 away win over Montpellier on Sunday. His goal in the 53rd minute made it 5-2 for what was his fourth in all competitions for the French club. PSG sit top of the table, 12 points clear of Brest. Over in Serbia, Hwang In-bom scored his third goal of the season in Crvena Zvezda's 5-0 Superliga win on Sunday over Radnički to go 4 points clear at the top. Hwang got the game's fourth in the 68th minute to make it 4-0, turning home from close range. Meanwhile, Cho Gu-song was also on target for FC Midtjylland, and Lee Jae-sung got an assist for Mainz in Germany. This Thursday, all will likely be involved in Korea's World Cup qualifier with Thailand. It's the first match since the Asian Cup and first under caretaker manager Hwang Sun-hong.
And finally, to short track speed skating, outstanding performances by Korean skaters at the World Cup Championships in the Netherlands.
Yes, and perhaps you could say Kim Gil-lee was South Korea's standout performer. She won gold in the women's 1500 metres with a time of 2 minutes 21.192 seconds, just 0.2 seconds ahead of second place. It was also her first ever individual gold medal. She also won silver in the 1000 metres. Korea's other silver medal came in the men's 5,000 metre relay, and there could have been more, but Hwang Dae-hun and Park Ji-won both collided in the 1,000 metres and 1,500 metres.
All right, our sports editor, Pauline, thank you. See you next week.
Thank you. See you.
As a cold wind blew, the air cleaned up, but a late cold snap came around. The temperature in Seoul this morning dropped to 1.4 degrees Celsius, 7 degrees lower than yesterday. Tomorrow morning, Seoul will start at 3 degrees. However, mild conditions will persist across the nation during the daytime. Seoul will see highs of 11 degrees for the daytime. As the daily highs rise, the daily temperature difference will widen further as well. Please take good care of your health. Currently, a dry weather advisory is in effect across the east. This will be relieved tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, with rain or snow falling all over the country. Heavy snow of up to 20 centimeters is forecast in the mountainous areas of Gangwon-do province, so make sure you're prepared. Tomorrow, Chuncheon will start off at -1 degree Celsius, Gyeongju 4 degrees. Highs in Busan and Gwangju will move up to 15, Daejeon 12 degrees Celsius. The late cold snap is expected to continue until late in the week after the rain or snow stop. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. And that is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.
Children's laughter, hope, dream. K-animation belongs in them. Interesting and valuable story that transcends between everyday life and dream. Surprising spectacle where imagination becomes real. An array of subjects catering from infants to adolescents. For our story to reach all corners of the world. K-animation makes healthy laughter for children. Completely new. But something anyone can relate with. Flawlessly made. And tears that go with it. K-drama. Korea is coming at you with another story to tell.
It's the hip 신당동, also known as 힙당동.
Good evening to our viewers in Korea and hello to others watching from around the world. Welcome to this edition of Within the Frame. I'm Han-dan in Seoul. Russia held its presidential election over the weekend as the world closely watched, and there were no surprises. President Vladimir Putin came out on top, officially becoming the longest-serving Russian leader since Joseph Stalin of the Soviet Union. The victory was loud and clear, but questions remain about Putin's domestic and international challenges. What does Putin's further cementing of his already tight grip on power mean to Russia, Korea, and the world? For some insights, we invite Professor Min Jung-hoon at the Korea National Diplomatic Academy to the studio. Thank you so much for coming in today.
My pleasure.
And joining us virtually from Canberra is Malcolm Davis, Senior Analyst at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. So great to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
Professor Min, let's start with you. So Putin clinched his fifth term, extending his rule to at least 2030. He won 87.8% of the vote, which is the highest ever result in Russia's post-Soviet history. That's according to an exit poll by pollster the Public Opinion Foundation. What significance does this hold for Putin, and what does this sweeping victory mean to Russia?
Yes, and as you mentioned, there was no surprise in the outcome of the election, and Putin has won the election, and he will be the longest-serving Russian leader since the Soviet Union period. And this election ensured his lifelong rule in Russia. And as we saw on the screen, it is known that Putin has received 87.8% of the vote, and the voter turnout of the election is 74.2%, which is the highest turnout since 1991. So these numbers show that although U.S. and other Western the countries argued that the election was unfair, Putin is still very popular among Russian voters. And the Russian people like Putin because he is a strong leader who has brought the glory of empire back to the Russian people and stabilized the Russian economy despite the economic sanctions. So although Russian people still suffer from the economic hardship, they think that it's tolerable and that they do not have much difficulties in their daily lives. And the outcome of the election shows that Putin controlled completely its government officials and political adversaries to win the election. It means that his domestic leadership is robust and that there is no viable political opposition in Russia. So overall, this election paves the way for Putin to do whatever he wants in the coming years. And specifically based on the money from export of oil and natural gas, he will manage Russian economy and maintain his popularity domestically. In addition, he could be more aggressive in the Ukraine war and more active in enhancing its cooperation with its partners like China and North Korea and mobilizing developing countries as a multilateral diplomat, as a leader of the Global South.
So there really was no spoiler on this one, right? The outcome was never in doubt. Although there are several terms to call Russia's election, there's a pseudo, illegitimate, state-managed, and predetermined, and so forth. But even so, you believe that the election showed Russian people's strong support for Putin, and it was a way for Putin to secure perhaps his lifetime presidency. Now to you, Dr. Davis. It was a landslide victory for Putin, as many had expected, but it's no secret that there was no opposition in the rubber stamp election. Our Professor Min here has just pointed out that Putin, it showed that Putin still enjoys strong popularity from the Russian people. But in your view, is Putin really enjoying the massive popularity and strong support from the people of Russia?
I think for the moment he is. Essentially, Russia is obviously an authoritarian state. It's not a democracy. So Putin can essentially stamp out any opposition, and he goes to extreme lengths, as he's seen with the killing of Boris Nemtsov and Navalny. So I think that the Russian people understand the consequences of opposing Putin. There are some street demonstrations, but they're quickly shut down by the OMON, the Russian interior security troops, who then take the people away for interrogation and basically putting in a gulag. I think that Putin has an iron hand on the situation so long as the war in Ukraine goes his way, which it seems to be going now. He can continue to maintain a grip on power. If the war starts going against him, or if attacks inside Russia start escalating, then there might be some challenges. But really, there's no one set to replace Putin that we could call pro-Western or democratic. Anyone who follows Putin is more likely to be even worse than Putin.
And it seems like that many experts echo your argument. They say that a lot of analysis is pouring in at the moment, and they say that most Russians, they believe that Putin has more strengths than weaknesses. And what people of Russia want now more than ever is a strong Russia. And they believe that Putin is the perfect person who can achieve that. Now staying with you, Dr. Davis, Putin is often referred to as the weak, strong man, though. And many say that Putin's power is weakening and the system he built is becoming more fragile. And they point to the deaths of Putin's biggest political opponent, Alexei Navalny, and Wagner chief Prigozhin as proof. What are your thoughts on this?
Look, that's possible. I mean, his state at the moment is a national security state. Its economy is based almost entirely on the military-industrial complex. There is incredibly heavy corruption right through the state. It's not the strong foundation for a state that has a future. I think that Putin has only war to offer the Russian people. And that's war in Ukraine and war beyond Ukraine. And I think that the risk is that if Putin sees a threat to his rule, or if the foundations of Russian economy start to fall apart because maybe the military-industrial economy starts to show signs of weakness, it can't produce quality of life that the people want, then you could see more challenges to Putin like Prigozhin. But I think that for the time being, we can't assume that Putin will somehow be removed from power. And as I said earlier, the only replacements for Putin are worse than Putin in terms of being extreme nationalist leaders that are perhaps more willing to even go further than Putin in using military force, not only in Ukraine, but also against the West in general.
Well, you know what people say. They say that the only thing standing in the way of Putin's lifetime presidency is Putin's own health. And you've pointed out that Putin does face some challenges, such as war fatigue, economic uncertainties amid continuing Western sanctions, and also the possible rise of a strong opposition, especially after the death of Navalny. But that possibility remains extremely low at the moment. Now to you, Professor Min. What does Putin's victory mean to the ongoing war in Ukraine? Would Putin be able to press ahead with what he calls special military operation in Ukraine, despite lack of significant military success and the impact of Western sanctions?
Well, basically, I think that the landslide victory of the presidential election means that President Putin has secured politically procedural legitimacy domestically to implement the policies that he wants. Regarding the Ukraine war, Putin has got the momentum to stay in the war and conduct further military operation to maintain upper hand over Ukraine in the war. And after taking a better position of Ukraine in the war, there is a possibility that Putin will maintain the status quo and wait until this November, when the U.S. will hold the presidential election. And it seems that President Putin wants former President Trump to win the election. Trump mentioned during the campaign trail that he would begin a negotiation for a peace treaty between Russia and Ukraine within the 24 hours after he takes the office. And it is likely that status quo will be the threshold to sign on a treaty, which means that Russia could be admitted to officially occupy the Ukraine territories that it took away during the war. Of course, Ukraine will not welcome it, but there will be no option but to accept it. Meanwhile, if President Biden gets reelected in November, Putin will try to maintain the war as much as possible, as long as possible. So the war could last 3 or 4 more years. And if the war is prolonged like that, the war fatigue among the Ukraine's Western friends, including the United States, will increase significantly as time goes by. Then Ukraine will be forced to begin a negotiation for peace treaty and will have to accept that it will lose at least some portion of its territory. So I think that eventually time is on Russian side. So, and the outcome of the upcoming U.S. president election will decide when a peace treaty will be made. So still all possibilities are open, but the situation is moving on Russian side.
Putin told in his victory speech after the election, he made 2 things clear, that he will prioritize in tasks associated with the war in Ukraine, while also further strengthening the Russian military. So an extended war and also Putin's stronger aggression looks all but certain at the moment. Now to you, Dr. Davis. Putin, during his victory speech, also made it clear that the election results should send a message to the West that its leaders will have to reckon with an emboldened Russia, whether in war or in peace, for many more years to come. That's after he told local media that Russia is ready for a nuclear war, just a few days ahead of the election. Do you expect Russia's relations with the West to drift further apart after Putin's re-election?
Absolutely. There is no way that there will be any sort of rapprochement between the West and Russia with the Putin regime in charge, or indeed I would expect with any follow-on regime in Moscow to be in charge. I think that your other guest, I think, summed up the options in Ukraine quite well. Putin has time on his side. He can outlast the resolve of the West, which is now suffering from war fatigue. So long as Western military assistance is halted to Ukraine, Ukraine is not in a good position to defend its territory. So what you are seeing now is Russian forces steadily advancing in the east and the south, capturing more Ukrainian territory. What they're trying to do is find weak points in the Ukrainian defenses that they can then break through. And there's an expectation that in the summer of 2024, that you will see a Russian offensive going forward designed to capture some key significant urban areas. I think what happens at the end of that is that Russia controls significantly more terrain of Ukraine than it does at the moment. And as your other guest suggested, Trump gets in and basically hands Ukraine to Putin, and at the same time abrogates the United States' responsibilities under Article 5 of the NATO treaty, so therefore shatters NATO as an organization. That then gives Putin the time to rebuild Russian military capability so that in the second half of this decade, Russia is then able to threaten NATO directly with military attacks on its eastern frontier. And if we want to talk nuclear war, that's when that scenario starts to come to the fore, that risk that a Russian victory in Ukraine sets the stage for a much larger, more dangerous war between NATO and Russia that could quickly escalate into the use of nuclear weapons. If, on the other hand, you see Ukraine somehow coming back into a more favorable position, perhaps because the aid starts flowing and Russian forces are pushed back, then at a certain point you could see Putin being willing to use tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine, and you end up with the same result. So unfortunately, there's no happy endings here in regards to Ukraine.
Well, Putin threatened, after his re-election, threatened NATO with World War III. He warned NATO against any move that would risk direct conflict with Russia, saying it would be one step away from World War III. And so I think that tells a lot about Putin's future diplomatic tactics. And also, we will see stronger aggression from Putin against Ukraine as well as against the West, at least for the time being. Now, Professor Min, now that the election's over, speculations are high that Putin will soon visit North Korea to reciprocate Kim Jong-un's visit to Russia last year. When do you expect his visit to come, and what will be at the top of the agenda?
Yes, it is likely that Putin will visit North Korea after his inauguration in May this year. As you know, Chairman Kim visited Russia last year and had a summit meeting with Putin there. And it was known that Putin was invited to visit North Korea at that time. And in this January, the Russian Presidential Office confirmed that Putin had been invited to visit North Korea, and he would visit North Korea in the near future. But it also said that Putin would not visit North Korea before the presidential election. So it is likely that Putin will visit North Korea after his inauguration sometime in May or June. But many experts think that there is a possibility that Putin will first visit China and then visit North Korea, probably May or June this year. As you may remember, the President Xi Jinping chose Russia as his first country to visit when he took office in 2013. And therefore, it's plausible to expect that Putin would visit China first this time. And he already got such kind of the travel itinerary. The Putin visited China first and then visited Pyongyang in 2000. So, regarding the agendas of the upcoming summit between Russia and North Korea, it is likely that the two leaders will mainly talk about how to improve their bilateral cooperation, like military and economic cooperation and human exchanges. And since the Ukraine war broke out, North Korea has improved its military and economic cooperation with Russia. And North Korea provides ammunition to Russia, and in return, it received economic aid, military weapons it needed, and technological advice from Russia. Meanwhile, Russia welcomed North Korea's military and diplomatic support in the Ukraine war. And with North Korea's ammunition, Russia could make up its ammunition shortage, and it could also show off to the international community that Russia was not alone in the war. So these situations show that the bilateral cooperation between North Korea and Russia has been beneficial for both countries. And there is the evaluation among the North Korean experts that North Korea did a very good performance with the help of Russia last year. So it is expected that the two leaders will mainly talk about how they would enhance their cooperation in the upcoming summit.
We are a little pressed on time, so I'm just going to skip to our last question. Professor Min, South Korea-Russia relations have hit new lows after recent diplomatic rows over South Korea's aid to Ukraine, and also due to Russia's arrest of a South Korean national on spying charges. What are your prospects for the two countries' relations going forward?
Well, I think that South Korea-Russia relations got worse after the Ukraine war broke out. But Russia has not completely closed the door for diplomatic relations with South Korea. Russia still thinks that South Korea is a neighboring country that does not impose direct threats to Russia, and South Korea is still an important partner for its economic development. And meanwhile, it's necessary for South Korea to manage its relations with Russia. As you know, Russia has been an important partner of South Korea for coping with North Korean problems, energy security, and economic cooperation. Although, so of course, there's no doubt that Russia should be blamed for invading Ukraine, but it's still necessary for South Korea to manage its relations with Russia in terms of its national interests. So personally, I hope that South Korea will silently increase its diplomatic efforts to manage its relations with Russia. Putin's inauguration, personally, I think, could be a turning point to improve the bilateral relations between the two countries. So I think South Korea does not need to make an official statement about the outcome of the Russian election and Putin's inauguration, and silently increase its communication with Russian counterparts after Putin is inaugurated. So personally, I believe that it's about time for South Korea to pragmatically manage its relations with Russia.
All right, so hopefully South Korea will quietly and subtly, but still strike the delicate balance there between Russia and Ukraine. Hopefully it'll come up with some smart strategy. Thank you. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Dr. Davis and Professor Min, for sharing your insights tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you for watching, and be sure to tune in at same time tomorrow to join our conversation. Goodbye for now.